Something absolutely catastrophic just emerged from a classified Pentagon briefing that could end Trump's presidency before it even begins. Military commanders are using words like unprecedented failure and strategic catastrophe to describe what just happened in a theater of operations that Trump personally ordered against unanimous military advice. Sources with direct knowledge of the situation tell us that the defeat was so complete, so predictable, and so avoidable that members of Congress from both parties are now openly discussing whether it constitutes grounds for impeachment before Trump can take office again. When generals who have spent their entire careers avoiding political statements start using terms like dereliction of duty, you know something truly extraordinary has occurred. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal about this military disaster will completely change the 2024 election landscape. So what exactly happened that has Pentagon officials describing it as the worst American military defeat since the fall of Saigon? On January 14th, a joint special operations task force executing an operation personally ordered by Trump suffered catastrophic losses in what military analysts are calling a textbook example of tactical failure resulting from political interference in military planning. The operation, codenamed Iron Fist, was supposed to be a decisive strike against terrorist infrastructure in a hostile region that would demonstrate American military dominance and provide Trump with a major foreign policy victory heading into the primary season. Instead, it turned into a complete disaster that resulted in 11 American deaths, 23 wounded, the loss of 2 helicopters worth $140 million combined, and worst of all, the capture of 5 U.S. special operators who are now being held hostage and paraded on enemy propaganda videos. Intelligence officials say the tactical situation is so dire that any rescue attempt would likely result in additional casualties and has virtually no chance of success. Now, here's where this gets even more devastating than it appears on the surface. This wasn't an operation that went wrong due to bad intelligence or unexpected enemy capability. This was an operation that every single military professional who reviewed the plan said would fail exactly the way it failed. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs told Trump directly that the intelligence was insufficient, that the tactical plan was unsound, and that the risk of American casualties was unacceptably high. The theater commander said his forces weren't properly positioned for the operation and that executing it on Trump's demanded timeline would almost guarantee failure. The Defense Intelligence Agency assessment concluded that enemy forces were far stronger than Trump believed and that they had been tipped off about potential U.S. operations in the region. Every expert who looked at this plan said, "Don't do it." And Trump ordered it anyway because he wanted a military victory to announce at his New Hampshire campaign rally on January 16th. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far, because the details get even more disturbing. Multiple sources who were in the room when Trump received the military briefing say he dismissed the concerns as defeatist thinking and said he didn't elect generals to tell him what couldn't be done. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs persisted in his objections, Trump reportedly told him that maybe it was time to find a chairman who understood that America wins wars. The implicit threat was clear. Either support this operation or be replaced by someone who will. And here's where it really gets serious. Military officers are taught from their earliest days in service that they have an obligation to provide honest military advice, even when civilian leaders don't want to hear it. But they're also taught that once the civilian leadership makes a decision, the military executes that decision to the best of their ability. Don't go anywhere, because the most explosive part is coming next. What happened after Trump overruled all military advice and ordered the operation to proceed is exactly what commanders predicted. The assault force inserted via helicopter into what they believed was a lightly defended compound based on intelligence Trump insisted was accurate, despite warnings from DIA that it was outdated. Within minutes of insertion, the force came under heavy coordinated fire from enemy fighters who were clearly expecting them. The helicopters that had just dropped off the assault force came under anti-aircraft fire. One was hit and crashed, killing all 4 crew members. The second helicopter sustained heavy damage and barely made it back to friendly territory before being deemed unflyable. The assault force on the ground found themselves pinned down by enemy fire with no easy extraction option and rapidly dwindling ammunition. An emergency quick reaction force was scrambled, but they flew into the same kill zone and their helicopter was also hit. 2 more crew members died in that crash. The surviving members of both assault teams, along with survivors from the Quick Reaction Force, fought for 7 hours before 5 operators were captured when they ran out of ammunition and the enemy overran their position. Here's the full picture of what military investigators are now uncovering about the decision-making process that led to this catastrophe. Starting in December 2023, Trump began pressing military commanders to develop an operation that would show American military strength and decisiveness. He wanted something dramatic, something that would dominate news coverage, something he could point to as proof that he was the strong leader America needed. When commanders presented options, Trump rejected them as too cautious and too small scale. He wanted an operation that would be remembered, that would send a message, that would cement his reputation as a wartime leader who gets results. The problem was that the operation he envisioned, a large-scale raid deep into hostile territory to capture or kill multiple high-value targets, was exactly the kind of operation that requires months of planning, detailed intelligence, and extensive preparation. Trump wanted it done in weeks so he could announce the results during the primary campaign. Military planners told him repeatedly that rushing the operation created unacceptable risks. They said intelligence on the target location was insufficient. They said enemy force strength in the region was greater than Trump acknowledged. They said the proposed timeline didn't allow for proper rehearsals or contingency planning. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming, because I read every single one. Now things get absolutely wild when you understand that Trump had already planned his campaign rally announcement before the operation even launched. According to sources familiar with the campaign planning, Trump's team had prepared a speech declaring that he had eliminated major terrorist leaders and dealt a crushing blow to America's enemies. The speech included specific language about how Trump succeeded where Biden failed, and how only Trump had the courage to make the tough calls that keep America safe. Video graphics were prepared showing Trump in the Situation Room appearing presidential and in command. The entire campaign event was built around announcing a successful military operation that hadn't happened yet. When military commanders learned that Trump had essentially pre-announced the operation's success, they were horrified. A retired four-star general told congressional investigators that planning your victory celebration before the battle even begins is the kind of hubris that has destroyed military leaders throughout history. He noted that Trump's focus seemed to be entirely on the political optics rather than on the lives of the soldiers he was putting at risk. The bombshell moment came when investigators discovered that Trump had shared operational details about the planned raid with several people at Mar-a-Lago who had no security clearances and no need to know. He reportedly told them about the upcoming operation to impress them with his role as commander-in-chief. This isn't the first time concerns have emerged about presidential decision-making on military operations, but the scale and consequences here are in a completely different category. Think back to the Bay of Pigs, where Kennedy approved a CIA plan that was poorly conceived and inadequately supported. That operation failed, but Kennedy accepted responsibility, fired people who needed to be fired, and learned from the mistake. Or Desert One, the failed Iran hostage rescue in 1980, where Carter approved a complex operation that military commanders believed could work, but was undermined by equipment failures and bad weather. That mission failed, but it was a tactical failure, not a strategic blunder driven by political calculations. What happened here is different. This was an operation that every expert said would fail. This was an operation rushed to meet a campaign timeline rather than military readiness standards. This was an operation where the commander-in-chief was more concerned with having a political talking point than with the safety of the soldiers he was sending into combat. And when it failed exactly as predicted, 11 Americans died and 5 more are now hostages in an incredibly difficult tactical situation. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet, because this content doesn't exist anywhere else, and what comes next is even more damaging. So what allegedly makes this situation rise to the level where even Republicans are privately discussing impeachment? According to constitutional scholars and military law experts who have reviewed the timeline and decision-making process, it comes down to whether Trump violated his oath of office and his duties as commander-in-chief. The Constitution requires the president to faithfully execute the laws and to act as commander-in-chief in the national interest. Military law and regulations require that operations be planned and executed based on military necessity and sound tactical principles. When a president orders a military operation knowing that it contradicts unanimous military advice, knowing that it's being rushed for political purposes, and knowing that it places American lives at unacceptable risk for the purpose of generating campaign talking points, multiple legal experts say that crosses the line into potential high crimes and misdemeanors. A former Army judge advocate general told congressional investigators that while presidents have broad authority to order military operations, that authority must be exercised in good faith and in the national interest. Ordering an operation that military experts say will fail just so you can try to announce a victory at a campaign rally is not a good faith exercise of command authority. It's a misuse of military power for personal political gain. And here's what should alarm everyone, regardless of their political opinions about Trump. 5 American special operators are now hostages being used as propaganda by our enemies. Videos of them bound and blindfolded are circulating on terrorist social media accounts. Intelligence analysts say they're being interrogated about American military capabilities, tactics, and future operations. Every day they remain in captivity is another day our enemies learn about our most sensitive special operations methods. Don't go anywhere, because here's where the implications become truly staggering. The enemy that captured these operators is now demanding the release of hundreds of detained terrorists in exchange for returning the Americans. U.S. policy has always been that we don't negotiate with terrorists and don't pay ransoms, because doing so encourages more hostage-taking. But Trump is reportedly pushing military and intelligence officials to strike a deal to get the hostages back before the issue becomes a political liability. Military commanders are telling him that giving in to terrorist demands will endanger Americans worldwide by signaling that hostage-taking works. Trump apparently doesn't care about the long-term implications. He wants the immediate problem solved regardless of future consequences. This puts Republican members of Congress in an absolutely impossible position that will define their political futures. On one side, they have a base that remains loyal to Trump and will believe his explanation that the operation failed because of intelligence failures or because subordinates didn't execute his brilliant plan properly. That base will never accept that Trump made a mistake or that he put American lives at risk for campaign purposes. On the other side, they have military families who lost loved ones in an operation that military commanders said shouldn't have been executed. They have the families of hostages who are watching their sons be paraded on enemy videos. They have career military officers telling them that Trump ordered an operation over unanimous military objections for political purposes. And they have constitutional scholars saying that misusing military power for campaign purposes is exactly what impeachment was designed to address. And here's the tricky part that makes this moment different from previous Trump controversies. This isn't about policy disagreements or political rhetoric. Americans are dead. Americans are captives. The defeat is documented in after-action reports, in testimony from survivors, in enemy propaganda videos. There's no spinning this as fake news or witch hunt. The disaster happened. It happened exactly as military experts predicted, and it happened because Trump wanted a campaign talking point more than he wanted to listen to military advice. Legal and constitutional experts are calling this the clearest case for impeachment they've seen. A Harvard law professor who has written extensively on presidential war powers told news networks that using military force not for national security purposes but for personal political gain is precisely the kind of abuse of power that impeachment was designed to remedy. He noted that if presidents can order military operations that experts say will fail, resulting in American casualties, just to generate favorable campaign coverage, then the commander-in-chief role has been fundamentally corrupted. A former federal judge added that the evidence of Trump's intent is unusually clear in this case. He ordered an operation over unanimous military objections. He rushed the timeline to fit campaign needs. He pre-planned his victory announcement, and he shared operational details with unauthorized persons at his resort. Each of these facts individually would be concerning, but together they paint a picture of someone who viewed military operations as props in his political theater rather than serious matters of national security involving American lives. Do me a favor and slam that like button, because it genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to understand what happened. Even some conservative commentators who have defended Trump through every previous controversy are expressing concern about this situation. A National Review columnist wrote that while he supports Trump's broader foreign policy vision, ordering a military operation that generals said would fail just so you can announce a victory at campaign rallies is indefensible. He argued that conservative principles include respect for military expertise and recognition that American soldiers' lives should never be risked for political gain. A former Republican congressman who served on the Armed Services Committee told reporters that if the facts are as described, Republicans will have to make a choice between party loyalty and their duty to the Constitution and to military families who deserve accountability when their loved ones are killed in operations that should never have been ordered. So let's break down what this actually means for Trump's political future and for potential congressional action. First, there's the immediate political impact on his 2024 campaign. Instead of having a military victory to announce at his rally, Trump had to explain a catastrophic defeat. Instead of looking strong and decisive, he looked reckless and irresponsible. Campaign ads are already circulating featuring military experts explaining how the operation failed exactly as they predicted, and featuring family members of those killed asking why Trump ordered an operation that military commanders opposed. These ads are devastating because they come from military families and retired generals, not from Democratic operatives, making them impossible to dismiss as partisan attacks. Second, there's the impact on Trump's support among military voters and veterans. These have traditionally been core Republican constituencies. But polling conducted after the Iron Fist disaster shows Trump's support among active duty military has dropped to 38%, a 22-point decline from 3 months ago. Among military families, his approval is at 41%, and among veterans, it's at 47%. These numbers are catastrophic for a Republican candidate who needs strong military support to win. Finally, there's the congressional dimension that has Republicans in leadership genuinely worried. Democratic members of Congress are preparing articles of impeachment based on Trump's misuse of military authority. While Trump is not currently in office, which complicates impeachment, there is constitutional precedent for impeaching former officials to prevent them from holding future office. And more significantly, multiple Republican members have privately told party leadership that if the evidence is as bad as it appears, they cannot defend Trump's actions to their constituents, many of whom are military families. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, because I'm genuinely curious whether you think enough Republicans would vote for impeachment to actually pass articles. But beyond the immediate political calculations, this is really about fundamental questions of civil-military relations and presidential accountability. Can someone who orders military operations over unanimous military objections for campaign purposes be trusted with the commander-in-chief role? Should someone whose decisions result in American deaths through what military experts call gross negligence and political calculation be allowed to return to the presidency? These aren't partisan questions. They're questions about basic fitness for the office and respect for the military professionals who serve under civilian leadership. This scenario is causing real anguish within Republican circles, particularly among those with military backgrounds. Reports indicate that several Republican senators who are themselves veterans have told party leadership that they cannot, in good conscience, defend Trump's decisions in this case. They view the decision to overrule military advice and rush an operation for campaign purposes as a fundamental betrayal of the trust between civilian leaders and military personnel. One Republican senator who flew combat missions in Iraq reportedly told colleagues that if he had lost friends because a civilian leader wanted a political talking point, he would demand accountability regardless of party affiliation. Meanwhile, Trump himself is furious that the military didn't make the operation succeed despite his brilliant planning. Sources close to Trump say he believes the operation would have worked if subordinates had executed it properly. He's blaming intelligence failures, inadequate air support, and poor execution by ground commanders. He's suggesting that the military deliberately sabotaged the operation to make him look bad. This blame shifting is infuriating military officers who followed Trump's orders despite their professional judgment that the operation would fail. Things escalated dramatically when Trump posted on social media attacking the generals who had opposed the operation, calling them weak and saying they lacked the warrior spirit needed to win. He suggested that the captured special operators might have performed better if they'd had stronger leadership. Military families and veterans groups immediately condemned these statements as disgraceful. The American Legion released a rare political statement saying that attacking military personnel who followed orders into a situation their commanders warned against is beyond the pale. The Veterans of Foreign Wars issued a statement demanding that Trump apologize to the families of those killed and captured. These organizations traditionally avoid political controversies, but felt compelled to speak out when Trump blamed soldiers for a failure that resulted from his own decisions. Stay with me because what comes next will completely change how you view Trump's chances in 2024. Here's what makes Trump's position truly precarious from both a legal and political standpoint. Congressional investigators have obtained testimony from multiple military officers who were in meetings where Trump was explicitly warned that the operation would likely fail. They have communications showing Trump discussing the operation with people at Mar-a-Lago who lacked security clearances. They have Trump's own campaign team's documents showing they planned the victory announcement before the operation launched. And they have after-action reports from the operation itself detailing exactly how it failed in the ways commanders predicted. This creates what legal experts call a clear chain of evidence showing intent, warning, decision, and predictable outcome. It's not just about one failed military operation anymore. This is about whether the presidency can be entrusted to someone who treats military operations as campaign props and who blames soldiers when operations fail exactly as military experts predicted. If there are no consequences when a president misuses military authority this egregiously, it tells future presidents that they can order whatever operations serve their political interests regardless of military advice or American lives at risk. Keep a close eye on this story because the next few weeks are absolutely critical. Congressional hearings are scheduled where the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and theater commanders will testify under oath about their warnings to Trump and his decision to proceed anyway. The families of those killed are demanding answers and calling for accountability. Republican members of Congress are deciding whether party loyalty outweighs their duty to military families and to the Constitution. And articles of impeachment are being drafted that will force every member of Congress to vote on whether Trump's conduct constitutes the kind of high crimes and misdemeanors that warrant removing his eligibility to return to office. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button so you never miss content like this. Here's where things stand right now in late January 2024. 11 American service members are dead, 5 are hostages in enemy hands, and the operation they died in was one that every military expert said would fail. Trump ordered the operation over unanimous military objections because he wanted to announce a victory at a campaign rally. He pre-planned his victory speech before the operation launched. He shared operational details with unauthorized persons at Mar-a-Lago. And when the operation failed exactly as predicted, he blamed the military personnel who followed his orders. Congressional investigators have documented testimony, communications, and evidence showing the entire decision-making process. Military families are demanding accountability. Veterans organizations are calling Trump's actions disgraceful. And Republican members of Congress are facing a choice between defending the indefensible or breaking with Trump and facing primary challenges from his base. This isn't just another political controversy that will blow over after a news cycle. This is Americans dead because of presidential decisions that military experts unanimously opposed. This is the commander-in-chief role being used for campaign purposes rather than national security. This is the fundamental question of whether presidents can send Americans into operations that will fail for political gain and face no consequences. The evidence is documented in military records, congressional testimony, and enemy propaganda videos. The defeat is undeniable. The warnings were clear. The decision was Trump's. And the consequences are 11 dead Americans and 5 hostages whose rescue may be impossible. The stakes have never been higher for accountability in the use of military force. The families of those killed deserve answers about why their loved ones were sent on a mission military commanders said would fail. The American people deserve to know whether their commander-in-chief can be trusted with military authority, and Congress has to decide whether Trump's conduct warrants the extraordinary step of impeachment to prevent him from returning to office. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage, because what happens next will determine whether accountability means anything when it comes to presidential misuse of military power.